in the kind of division that they are putting today.
All right, as I had earlier promised, my guests are with me in studio. Let me just introduce them. To my immediate left is Reverend Dr. Alphonse Kanga, who's the regional chair at NCCK. And of course, far left is Reverend Dr. Nelson Makanda, who is a vice chancellor at the African International University and equally representing Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. Good evening, and thank you so much for making time.
Good evening, thank you.
Now, before we get to this conversation, I just want to remind you of our big key tonight, and we ask, do you think offerings and tithes should be taxed? Do you think offerings and tithes should be taxed? 22151 is our SMS number, and of course you can tweet us at X at Ashley Mazuri, at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is KTN Prime. So let me now tell you about this Religious Organization Bill 2024, which was proposed by Tana River Senator Danson Mungatana, and of course has ignited significant backlash from religious leaders and across the country from the sector in general. Let's now take a look at some of those contentious provisions in the bill. And of course, I'll start with the first one, which is a religious institution will not be established without registration. So what the new bill seeks to do is establish the Office of Registrar of Religious Organizations. Then this particular office shall be headed by the registrar, assisted by a deputy registrar, and it shall issue, suspend, or revoke certificates of registration. Another thing that is contentious is that particular bill is that the theological training curriculum and code of conduct for religious leaders needs to be introduced. Not only that, churches are required to pay taxes, and of course you're aware that for decades churches in Kenya have been enjoying tax exemptions on tithes and offerings collected. So basically, according to the bill, these revenues will not be exempted from taxation unless entirely allocated to charitable causes. Something else that this bill introduces is that church accounts are to be audited yearly. And of course, those who are not compliant to this will face fines of up to 5 million shillings or, of course, imprisonment for up to 3 years or both. 10 years, actually. So let's get straight to this conversation. And I'll start with you, Reverend Makanda. You are representing the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and this, actually today, they came out and they were saying, you know what, this bill needs to be dropped as soon as possible. Why?
For various reasons. One is that this bill is a direct affront to Article 32 of the Constitution, which enshrines freedom of worship and conscience. This bill provides restrictions to worship. It says you cannot teach children to know God, and you cannot convert them. You must seek consent from an adult or from parents and things like that. The article in the Constitution provides an open freedom for all Kenyans to freely associate and to be able to express themselves, and gives freedom of conscience to everybody, adult and children included. One of the reasons why churches in this country started schools, and about 69% of basic education schools in Kenya, let alone technical schools and universities, are run and owned by the churches. You find a school here, in the next compound is a church. The church was there before the school. It was the mission of the church to evangelize Kenyans and provide education, provide healthcare, provide community development. So this particular draft bill by Honorable Mungatana is an affront to freedom of worship. And basically, starting from there, it is unconstitutional.
Okay.
Then there will be many other things that you have mentioned there. I mean, some of them are already happening. The second last bullet that you had there about auditing of churches. I mean, it happens. I'm wondering where he is. If you go to the registrar of societies, she will tell you that every year, every registered society in this country is required to submit audited accounts and reports. We already have adequate legislation in this country that we do not have to pursue an extra a constitutional mean by way of an act of parliament to punish churches, to punish freedom of worship, to punish clergy. I mean, if you ask that everybody must have a theological training, which school does Mungatana have for Wazee wa Kaya? Because Wazee wa Kaya is a religious group. Which theological school? Who will give them a certificate? They pray for us during Madaraka Day, Mashujaa Day, Jamhuri Day. They're the ones who come and pray. Which school have they been trained? Which certificate do they have? This is not to trivialize education, but to say that freedom of worship is higher. It's a higher freedom that you cannot legislate and begin to require of them extra constitutional documentation, training, and requirements for people to express themselves.
So what you're saying is it's a calling.
It's not just a call. It's a call for those who minister, to those who are priests, who are clergy, in whichever religion it is. But it's a human need to seek and to look for something higher than themselves.
Okay.
So it's a human need. It's a basic human need to yearn for something that is higher than themselves, to the extent that no government has capacity to legislate worship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming to you, Reverend Kanga, I mean, how did we get here? We got here because of the Shakahola massacre. I think at least 400 Kenyans lose their lives. But there was a task force, and that particular task force gave a report. In that particular report, the findings is that there was no policy framework for religious sector, and that rogue formations have been having a field day capturing the weak hearts of Kenyans. So then, is it justified if you look at it from that perspective?
I'm glad you are bringing up this, and that is why many people will question what was the intention. Was it, whereas the Senate have a right to legislate, but we live in the same country, we live under within the unity of the country. If this thing happened, it started from the Shakahola drama, and then the head of state came up with a task force. And then the task force took their time. They went around the 47 counties, and they have been working on this thing so that they can look for ways and means to structure not only church, but religion, so that they can come up with an all-round thing to be able to structure worship and religion in this country. The question comes in, was Mukatana part of the country? Was he following up what was happening? Or the intention was just to be able to trigger the church so that they can start talking about it. Now, what are we talking about? Because this is basically for the Senate. But now there was a task force that went around and collected information. And when the head of state was asked a question the other day, somewhere in Kisumu, what is happening, he said, I have a document from the task force. And out of this, I'm on the way of implementing a committee to be able to do the implementation metrics and make sure that it works. So to me, I'd have expected the Senate to wait for that so that we can put together or come up with good proposals that we can unite together and harmonize so that we can be able to work. Because the thing that he's raising here, some of these things Kenyans have talked about them within that task force.
Yes.
Me being a member, I'm aware in the 47 countries, Kenyans have addressed those issues. And if you wait for that report, surely those reports are there, what he has talked about, like the issue of regulation. We went around the country and Kenyans said one thing. We have no problem with regulation, but internal. Let the church, let the religious community regulate themselves through umbrella bodies. So the rest here, and that's what Kenyans are saying themselves. So when we talk of the Mukatana report, this document is creating hullabaloo. To me, is creating problems for nothing.
Yes.
Actually, it's not supposed to be there. We should be waiting for the task force report to see what is there, and then from there we work together as a nation through that implementation committee, which the head of state committed himself that soon and very soon is going to bring it up, and then we're able to walk through. And we have been working on it all through up to today. It is still.
So you were not consulted about this bill in whatsoever?
The one for Mukatana?
Yes.
No, we are not part of the Senate. That's a document for the Senate. But my question is, what was the intention at this particular time? Why can't you work as a nation, as a team, and work together? So that one is a separate thing altogether. Because the issues that are being mentioned here, Kenyans raised them because we consulted Kenyans on each of these issues in the task force.
So coming to you, Reverend Makanda, perhaps what would you amend in that bill? Because it's in the first reading.
I think the bill is fatally faulty. It's irredeemable. I do not think that that bill can see the light of day. Number one is that the Constitution of Kenya, if you like, you'll notice that it states about separation of state and religion. This bill puts state inside religion, so that then there's critical interference and offends Article 8. But then number two, it also offends Article 186, Schedule 4 of the Constitution, that provides functions for the Senate and functions for National Assembly. National Assembly has mandate over religion. Senate has no mandate over religion.
Okay.
So it's even in the wrong place. So it's fatally faulty. I think it's a mischievous project by Honorable Mungatana.
Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps let me be the devil's advocate. The whole issue that perhaps he is trying, I'm not aware what his intentions are, but perhaps the whole issue is religious extremism. How do we curb that while protecting religion as it is?
That's what I'm saying. I think we are going ahead. I'm saying the task force was there. The presidential task force was there. And these are the questions that we asked the pastors. We asked the other religious. We were both Muslim and all other Hinduism was there. In
all
that
religions.
All religions in Kenya.
Yeah.
And we asked a question, how do we deal with these issues? And there are specific issues how Kenyans suggested. We consulted. And then we have a document with the head of state. That document have answers to all this. So the best thing is that instead of we fighting Mukatana or Mukatana bring up a controversy, all these things, he has mentioned self-regulation, taxation, community, intentions, misconduct, politics. All these things were mentioned within the task force manual.
Yes.
And so how do we cap this? We said, number one, he talks about the Senate supervising. Kenyans did not talk about self-supervising. Actually, Kenyans said, regulate all religious community through umbrella bodies. And when it comes to how do we work it around, they proposed we have a commission, a religious commission. And that religious commission will be able to work around. Religious commission will bring together the same people, religious people and other interest people to formulate. And then we have structures. And then we have a practice and procedure, a system, how we'll be able to deal with religion in the country, all of us involved.
Yeah, perhaps you can share some light, like how exactly are you planning to deal with religion in the country?
Yes, that's what we are saying.
Yeah.
Number one, we suggested that it be a commission.
Okay, apart from the commission?
From the commission, there'll be umbrella bodies. From the umbrella bodies, now we'll ask people, either if you begin a church or a religious body, you will belong to an umbrella body. And if you don't want an umbrella body, you also have an open door to go through the other system, the government system. But if you are under an umbrella body, the umbrella will establish rules, will establish structures. And if there is an issue, instead of going straight to the police department, they'll ask the umbrella, and the umbrella will tell you qualify, you don't qualify. Issues of education. We are not saying that you must go to school, but if umbrella bodies will sit together, they'll tell you that for sure, whereas we don't undermine education, we are saying education can be organized in different directions from within. What do we mean by education? There is the liturgy of those, the way they do things in those systems. How do they cope together? Because even running on the highway, you need to know how to run. You need to know that that's the goal. And that's step one, step two, how to do work, how to operate. So within the umbrella body, that will be organized. And then through that commission, religious commission, they'll also have structures within themselves. There'll be a framework on how to operate. Out of that, we'll come up with a solution. Very easy.
Okay, but coming to you, Reverend, because self-regulation has been happening. And even amidst that self-regulation, we've seen people lose lives because of it. Is it enough?
Actually, today the Minister of Internal Security said that 42 people died and another 132 are not known where they are. About 174 Kenyans. I do not think that we are going to bring another law to deal with that problem. Because people have died, it does not require a new law. The penal code already exists. And the penal code will punish people who are corrupt, who are thieves, who are murderers, who abuse people, who molest people. So Kenya has adequate law, framework, legal framework to be able to deal with offenders. We do not require another law. Because, I mean, yes, it was here in June. Kenyans died. Nobody's going to go to parliament with an extra legislation to be able to deal with that problem. They are using existing laws. Kenya already has adequate laws. The only thing we are saying is that to be able to manage religious institutions in a more orderly organization, move them out of the Societies Act, just like football clubs moved out, the matatus moved out, and other people have moved out of, the political parties moved out of the same Societies Act.
Yes.
So we can move them out, but that law must bequeath the religious institutions the authority for self-regulation. It must not hand regulation to government. That's why this law is very offensive. It hands regulation to an outsider. And where the law has already said there will be separation between state and religion. Religious institutions have capacity amongst themselves to be able to regulate themselves because they understand the industry much better. And we are not saying that it is not right for religious institutions to pay taxes where taxes are due and are required. But you cannot go to the extent to ask that taxes shall be paid on offering and tithes. Religious institutions are public benefit institutions. There's a Public Benefit Act in place that protects such institutions, not just religious institutions. NGOs, trusts, foundations are all protected. I mean, there are institutions in this country, hospitals, Nairobi Hospital, Aga Khan Hospital, and all others are institutions of public benefit, and they are protected in this country. So singling out religious institution is discrimination.
Okay.
Yes. So for us, we are not saying we don't want to have order. We are just reminding our leaders
Of their place.
Mungatana included, that he has a role to legislate. But this is not how to legislate.
Okay.
Yes.
Reverend, even as you add to that, there is a Kenyan who's saying, we need a bill to establish Religious Education Act to regulate religious training and establish a professional association and code of conduct.
He's just saying the same thing.
Yes.
He's just saying the same thing that what I've mentioned, that when there is that implementation team from the head of state, now that implementation team will go through and educate Kenyans on what is in that presidential task force report. And all those things are there. But the issue of taxes, I think, as he said, we have a constitution. We have a law in this country that governs. And the church is really obedient to that law. Churches that own institutions like hospitals, schools, they pay taxes like anybody else. When we talk of tithe and offering, it is good to have the church itself or the community themselves regulate them, because they understand what philosophy, the spirituality of those churches. When I go to church, offering is part of my worship. I give as an offering as part of worship. And when I give as part of, it's part of my worship procedure. When I give as part of worship, it is important to be respected, our freedom to give as part of worship and dictate what it's going to do. For example, if I give this offering as part of worship and I wanted the pastor to use it for the children's home, it should be respected. Not for you to come and get it and say, because it was part of worship, as part of my worship, you deduct my worship so that I can tax. But the rest of the issues,
double taxation.
That's double taxation.
The money is coming from people who have been taxed already. Yes, to do a public good. Yeah. And he's, as he's saying, if tithe and offering are an act of worship, we don't go to church to worship our government. We go to worship God.
All right.
Actually, the scripture,
Yes.
which I believe in, it says, tithe and offering belongs to the orphans and those who come around the church. So the government cannot be part of the orphans. And yet we are doing the same thing. The church and the state has one desire, that they serve their community faithfully with love and dignity.
Okay.
And I give us my worship as an offering of worship to go to the children's home. And then you come and say, no, let me take part of it. Have you become the children's home? Have you become the widow that is supposed to be?
All right, we're out of time. But your final thoughts, Reverend, even as we close.
Allow me to say a few things
Yes.
as we close.
Yes.
One is to say that the Religious Organization Bill 2024 has been rejected by the religious institutions in this country and people for the reasons that we have said. But having said that is to say that where I sit, the church in this country, other than any other institution in Kenya, has given this country public good. The church has educated Kenyans. There's no single institution, even government does not compete the church in giving good to this country. Recently, doctors were on strike for about 2 months. Healthcare was being run by church-owned institutions across the country. The church is an institution of public good in this country, and an affront towards it is an affront against the public. We do much more within the religious society than what politicians do, than what NGOs do, than what political parties do, in some cases, than what governments do. We provide psychosocial support, we provide refuge. When they have incited people and they have fought out there and they're killing each other, when they're running, they come to where churches are. When Mayu happened recently and there was a flood that swept over people, the people who were on the ground first before government arrived were clergy and religious institutions.
Yes.
So it's just to say, kindly allow religious institutions to remain religious institutions. Do not make religious institutions become institutions of your antagony and desire to look for fame, to become heroic, or to show that you are doing something. Kenya has enough needs for legislation.
Okay.
We have enough crises in this country. The church is not one of the crises that we have in this country.
Reverend, final thoughts.
The church must have a role in social justice. And on this, quickly to finish, is that please, let's not create war that's not there. Let's not create an argument that's not there. The Mukatana's bill has nothing to do with the church. That's an independent thing, and it's not acceptable. It's not, based on what's there, it's not acceptable. But let's hold on until we have what Kenyans have said through the task force. When you get from there, you'll have a room now to say, this is where we are heading. But this thought line of the Senate can continue doing what they know better. But because they are interfering with the church direct, the religious team direct, is going to create confusion for nothing.
All right.
So they better put it aside, let's wait and do the right thing together.
All right, and of course, when that time comes, I hope we'll come here and discuss it as well.
Discuss it openly,
okay, definitely.
That's
Thank
true.
you so much.
Asha, just allow me to mention the last thing.
Yes.
Is that the National Council of Churches of Kenya, Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and an institution called Hesabika and other umbrella bodies came up last year and launched a code of conduct and guidelines for self-governance and regulation. So the church is already ahead of this game with self-regulation. Allow the church to self-regulate.
All right, allow me to end it at that point. Thank you very much. Reverend Dr. Nelson Makanda, who is the Vice Chancellor at African International University and equally representing EAK, that is the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and of course, Reverend Dr. Alphonse Akanga, who is the Regional Chair at the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK. We take a short break. I'll be back with more news.